Ladies and gentlemen, in this video I want to talk to you guys about the release window for the RTX 50 series of graphics cards. I've actually been given some tentative release information, and I also want to talk about some updates to the RTX 40 Super series as well as the release date for the 4060. In fact, let's start out with the 4060, shall we? As we all know, Nvidia have officially confirmed both the 4060 and have released the 4060 Ti. The 4060 Ti was one of those cards which was fairly promising. However, lack of bandwidth on the GDDR6 memory combined with honestly not as much L2 cache has meant that performance can be a little sporadic, combined with the fact that the 8GB variant of course does run out of, well, VRAM. But the 4060 does look rather promising. Despite the L2 cache being cut down a little more, the 8GB of RAM may not be such a big deal on this class of card. But what about the release date? Well, according to my sources, at the moment the release date is going to be the 29th of June. That's of course this year. However, the reviews of this card will go live a day prior. So basically by the end of June we'll know what the story is concerning these cards, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the market receives them. Again, the fact that we only have 128-bit bus may not be such a big deal with this class of card. Obviously there is a significant cut in the amount of CUDA cores and the rest of the specifications, but the cut to the L2 cache could also mean that we're going to get bandwidth constraints. Anyway, I will be very interested in this card for a 1080p/1440p performance perspective, and obviously combined with things like DLSS, I think it could be a pretty good contender, but as always with these things, wait for reviews. But now let's move on to RTX 40 Super. So I just want to touch on this briefly because Megasize GPU, who is a very well-known Twitter/leaker account, has actually stated that there are no current plans for RTX 40 Supers. And again, I've mentioned this previously in a video just under a week ago. I can't remember the exact time frame. This is what I've been hearing. There were some rumors that were swirling online that maybe the RTX 40 Supers would be coming in, but I don't think this is the case anymore. I'd personally heard quite a while ago that the Supers were considered at one point. However, there was no set in stone specifications. They hadn't, for example, said, okay, well, these GPUs are going to have X amount of RAM, this number of SMs, or anything like that. It was just, well, if RDNA 3 is very performant, or AMD launches the N31 refresh, then we may actually launch the Super series. However, that does not seem to be the plan at the moment. N31 refresh is cancelled. There is RDNA 3.5, or whatever you want to call it. Some people are also calling it RDNA 3 Plus. It's pretty much the same thing, which does have some RDNA 4 features back ported, but that is specifically for APUs as of the time I'm recording this video. It may end up in discrete, but I am highly skeptical that is not the current plans from AMD. They are basically using this for APUs such as Sarlacc, and RDNA 4 will be for the next discrete set of GPUs. So RTX 40 Super is not going to launch, and this brings us to Blackwell. So typically Nvidia works on a 2-year cycle, so every roughly 2 years they will launch a new architecture, and Blackwell is of course the next one for both PC gamers as well as things like HPC and high-end servers. Now, from what I understand, the GeForce derivatives, and I stress GeForces, it's not absolutely nothing to do with HPC or anything like that, but the GeForce variants are probably going to release in roughly the time frame as what we had with RTX 40. So for example, probably going to be seeing the cards roughly announced in September/October for release. This is what I've been told from a couple of sources at this point, and honestly, just looking historically at what Nvidia's historical release cycle is, I think that makes about sense. Again, these things can change, delays can happen, or plans could, be pushed forward, but currently, as of the time I'm recording this, I think that makes the most sense. So late Q3, more likely early Q4 for these cards. I have a feeling that these GPUs are going to be significantly faster than the RTX 40. I'm trying to do a little bit of due diligence at the moment because I have also heard that Nvidia are going to increase the amount of VRAM. In terms of the actual capacity, because a lot of the feedback, of course, with RTX 40, and also, let's just be honest, guys, they also want to encourage you to adopt the new architecture if you have, let's say, an RTX 3060 Ti. for example. Typically, and I think this is pretty common knowledge at this point, most people skip a generation. So for example, if you were the proud owner of a GTX 1080, for example, you could buy an RTX 3080, wasn't it? I'm sure it was Jensen who said, oh, GTX 10 owners, it's now safe to upgrade your GPU with the 30 series. I can't remember, was it the 40 series? I genuinely don't remember, so let me know in the comments. But what I do know is, generally speaking, most people, according to AMD, Nvidia, and so on, they know that people basically upgrade every couple of generations, and one of the big reasons, of course, people would want to upgrade is because of the amount of VRAM. So I suspect this is going to be a really big selling point, marketing point for the next generation of Blackwell. I also think there's going to be some significant improvements across the board for Blackwell's performance, but we'll talk about that in another video because at the moment I'm trying to clarify a couple of points. I also suspect, although I don't have this release date nailed down for RDNA 4, I've been hearing some conflicting information, but I've heard that AMD are going to probably launch in roughly the same time window. But again, don't take that with any reliability because I've heard some conflicting information that it may launch a little earlier. So I don't know too much about RDNA 4 at the moment. I'm trying to figure out the release window, but Blackwell, that's what I've been told. And now, perhaps not surprising, but also surprising news. Yeah, you'll understand what I mean in just a moment. AMD allegedly will be launching a 5600X 3D. Now, if you look at sales data for CPUs, typically speaking, AM4 is still selling very well. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, you have the fact that, well, there's just a crap ton of AM4 owners. So, for example, if you have, let's say, a 3700X, generally speaking, unless there's something hinky with your motherboard, you know, it's kind of really low end or something like that, it's not that difficult to put in, let's say, a 5800X 3D. And also, those CPUs are selling for much cheaper at the moment. There's some really good deals online. You can do some searching yourself, but even Amazon, a couple of big US retailers in the UK, they've been doing a lot of deals for various CPUs, of course, from AMD's lineup, and that's great, of course, for end users. Plus, also, a lot of folks who have upgraded, let's say, from the AM4 platform to AM5 or to Intel's latest CPUs, they have also been selling that AM4 stuff, so also the used market is really good at the moment for a lot of for AM4 CPUs. So for AMD, however, to create a 5600X 3D, it's not too surprising, and according to Chili Dog on Twitter, who is a quite well-known leaker, that's just what they're doing. Now, it does seem that the clock frequency is a little lower, so we're looking at 4.4 gigahertz, that's 100 megahertz less than the 5800X 3D, but we all know the deal with boost clocks anyway on CPUs and GPUs, and it really is dependent upon a large number of different things, so, you know, it's going to be very much contingent in your system. As I said a moment ago, the 5800X 3D is really cheap at the moment. You can get it online for like about $300 US, so a 6-core variant could be even cheaper. Theoretically, we should see the same amount of L3 cache as well. 6 cores, 12 threads. I'll be interested to see benchmarks for this. Some games are not super CPU demanding in terms of the number of threads. They require more like IPC and clock frequency and, you know, single thread throughput. And obviously then you have other games which are kind of a mixture of both. I think it's arguable that 6 cores, 12 threads is going to be okay for now. It's going to very much depend on, well, whether A, this does officially launch, because it could just be for certain markets, certain segments, OEMs, or it may end up being scrapped before the launch date. Again, I haven't heard anything about this myself. I had reported, I believe, this absolutely ages ago when, you know, Zen 3 was all the rage, that AMD were considering this, but then it seemed to be cancelled, so it seems to be back on, and I haven't heard anything since. I will be very interested to see what the price of this thing is, and I think if it's a really good price and it's a relatively easy drop-in solution, and motherboard vendors of course have BIOS support for it, I think it could be an excellent CPU for a lot of folks. AM4 honestly is still a really good CPU architecture. I'm actually curious in the comments for people who have been running AM4, do let me know. How long have you been keeping your board for? For example, were you an early adopter with, let's say, the first Zen architecture? Let's say you picked up like a 1600X or a 1700X or something like that. And if so, did you swap your 300 series board out along the way, or are you still rocking it? It's quite interesting. I picked up the 1700X at launch, and it's, you know, I think AMD really knocked it out the park with the AM4 boards and the support. Early boards, you know, the BIOSes were a little hinky. I can't remember the Asus board I bought. It's a Prime, I think, or something like that. And it took a while for BIOS stability on certain memory. I had like multiple memory kits, and even one that said it was supported. I can't remember the configuration. This is so long ago, but it just refused to boot anything over like, I think it was anything over like 2133 or something. It was so bizarre. But other boards would be absolutely fine with that configuration. It was a really weird thing. But a couple of BIOS updates later and they fixed the problem. But overall, I think the AM4 platform has been absolutely awesome. It's going to be very interesting to see what AMD does with AM5. To my understanding, Zen 5, of course, that will be AM5. However, I am hearing some early reports that Zen 6 will not be, and that will be on AM6. However, they probably will still launch new chips on it for a while. Like, again, they seem to be doing that with AM4, so I suspect we're going to have that duality as well with AM5. So it's going to be very curious to see what AMD does with support for AM5. But anyway, I think that's just about it for this particular video. You will also notice that I managed to shave, unlike the previous video, where I look like a Yeti. If you're wondering, no, I'm not growing my beard out. I had a couple of people asking me about that. No, I wasn't. I was actually supposed to shave in the previous video, and then, yeah, the microwave just went boom. So I spent the time I was supposed to be spending shaving, trying to do a fault diagnostic to figure out, like, is it something to do with the power, or was it just something hinky with the microwave? And it seemed to just be something hinky with the microwave. So anyway, that's that little bit of drama done. I think that's just about it for this video, though. Let me know down below, though, what your thoughts are for the 5600X3D. Will you be picking it up or just giving it a skip for this generation? Take care of yourselves, guys. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.